Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of the DeKalb City Council, September 10, 2018. Prior to the start of the meeting and the roll call this evening, I'd like to remind anyone who would like to speak during the Committee of the Whole meeting this evening to kindly get a speaker request form. They're in the back, and give it to our City Clerk Lynn Fazekas or Deputy City Clerk Ruth Scott, and they will see that I get it. So with that, I would ask for a roll call, please.
Jacobson. Finucane.
Here.
Marquardt.
Here.
Fagan.
Here.
Noreko.
Here.
Verbeek.
Here.
Favor. Smith.
Here.
6 present.
Thank you. There are no items on our Committee of the Whole meeting tonight that are on the regular agenda. Since I do have no speaker request forms, I'm going to take it that nobody would like to speak to an item either on or on tonight's agenda, which focuses on a number of considerations, all of them under the able leadership tonight of our Police Chief, Gene Lowry. Gene?
Thank you, Mayor, Council, City staff, and community. This tonight is a special occasion for the Police Department. It's our 2018 award ceremony. And a little bit of history about it. We started this shortly after I arrived, and the purpose of having an award ceremony was to bring to light some of the challenges and some of the things that the police officers do, challenges they face, and some of the good deeds they do. It also, we always try to make it coincide with September 11th of 2001, which we now celebrate as Patriots Day. It's always important for us to remember those who sacrificed their lives for all of us, and to bring some sort of somber embrace of this moment as well. So tonight is all about honoring the men and women of the DeKalb Police Department. And I guess one thing I want to say is, as part of the goal of tonight, is to put into focus, maybe it's best to say paint a portrait of what the men and women of the DeKalb Police Department are all about. There's a lot of stereotypes out there that take us down one road or another, things we see on TV, things we read in the newspaper, good or bad. But I think you'll be proud of them by the end of the evening. I know you're already proud of them, but I think you'll be even prouder. So with that, we're about to bring in those new officers to be sworn in. As we are about to begin the swearing-in ceremony itself, I want to tell you a little bit about each of the officers that are here tonight. Tonight we have 5 police officers to be sworn in. They've had staggered hiring dates that cover the time frame of this ceremony. And the primary dates that are covered in this ceremony are from September of last year to current. The first police officer that we're going to swear in tonight, but we'll do them all in mass, is Raul Barraza. Let me tell you a little bit about Raul. He was raised in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. He graduated from Wheeling High School and served in the United States Marine Corps for a total of 10 years. He's deployed overseas in support of the global war on terrorism 3 times. Raul completed his bachelor's degree in criminal justice at Northeastern Illinois University and is currently a graduate student at Robert Morris University in Chicago. Prior to working for the DeKalb Police Department, Raul served as a correctional officer with the Cook County Sheriff's Office for nearly 6 years. He's the proud husband of Alexis, and together they have a daughter named Olivia. Would you just take one step forward, Raul? Thank you, and remain in place. The next officer we're going to introduce to you tonight is Max Paul. Max was raised in DeKalb and graduated from DeKalb High School in 2006. His father, Bernard Paul, is a former city attorney for the city of DeKalb. He attended Kishwaukee College and went on to Western Illinois University, where he would graduate with a bachelor's degree. He interned with the DeKalb Police Department and also volunteered with the DeKalb Police Department prior to becoming a police officer with the city of Springfield back in 2012. He served with the Springfield Police Department with honor for over 5 years before coming to us. Max, you take a step forward and remain in place. The next officer we're going to introduce is Elise Dusick. Elise grew up in Belvedere and attended Western Illinois University, majoring in law enforcement and also having a minor in Homeland Security. She completed an internship with the DeKalb Police Department in 2014, and after graduating from college, joined the Rock Falls Police Department and worked there for the last 3 years prior to becoming a police officer for the city of DeKalb. Elise, please take a step forward and remain in place. The next police officer is Tyler Scott. He comes from a long line of law enforcement, including his father, Thomas Scott, who's in attendance tonight, a retired lieutenant from Sycamore PD. He also has some familial ties with the sheriff, who's also here, Sheriff Scott. Thank you for coming tonight. Tyler is a graduate of Sycamore High School, attained his bachelor's degree from NIU. He was a deputy at the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office for 3 years prior to coming to the DeKalb Police Department. In his spare time, Tyler trains and teaches youth and adult martial arts classes at the Family Martial Arts Center school that they have here in DeKalb. Please take a step forward, Tyler, and remain in place. The last officer to be introduced, our most recent hire, is Philip Ryan Nicholson. Philip was born and raised in DeKalb and comes from a proud family tradition of law enforcement in the DeKalb County area. Ryan has 2 boys, Carson and Landon, and his wife Jordan, who's a registered nurse in Rockford. He graduated from high school, joined the United States Army, and served in the infantry at Fort Carson, Colorado. He earned his associate's degree from Pikes Peak Community College. He also worked for the Fountain, Colorado Police Department as a police officer prior to returning back to Illinois. He and his family moved back to Illinois to be a little closer to family, and he ultimately joined the Algonquin Police Department and served there for 1.5 years prior to becoming a police officer for the city of DeKalb. He indicates he's happy being a member of the DeKalb Police Department. I hope all 5 of you are. Ryan, please take a step forward and remain in place. At this time, I'd like to ask the clerk to come forward, and in mass, we'll do the swearing in. And for the family members that are here to do the pinning, we'll do that immediately following the swearing in. I'll ask you to come up at that point in time.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I,
Max Paul,
having been appointed to the position of police officer
having been appointed to the position of police officer
for the DeKalb Police Department
for the DeKalb Police Department
in the city of DeKalb,
in the city of DeKalb,
in the county of DeKalb,
county of DeKalb,
do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of police officer
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of police officer
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Officers, if I could have you remain in place. Are there any family members that would like to come forward? If so, please do at this time. Now, I hope everybody knows what to do here, right? Really hard and deep that needle goes in. Just kidding. That kid, just kidding. So if you'd like to step forward at this time and place the star on your loved one's dress blouse. For the police service, the pinning by a family member is a significant event. And what the pinning of a family member signifies is that not only is the family member pinning their loved one, but the family member is coming in, being welcomed into the police family. You know what? You can stay up there for just a minute, because I'm going to talk for just a second. So why don't you get next to your loved one? You guys can spread out a little bit. We can get Penny might be able to get a picture of that. And I want to talk to you for just a second. You know, ceremonies can be just ceremonies, but the purpose of this ceremony is to give you a few words as well. At the police department, there's an expectation that I have, and I hope that all future chiefs have. And we call those the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are as follows. Just moments ago, you took your oath. In regard to that oath, the first pillar is this: honor your oath and what that means to this community. By honoring your oath, you've pledged to do the right thing by this community and to always hold yourself in an ethical high standard, always doing the right thing. The second pillar is focus on the mission. There are many things along the path of a police officer that can take you down the wrong road. It's imperative with that oath in your background that you look at that road ahead of you and always do your very, very best to stay on the right path. Second pillar, focus on the mission. The third pillar is service over self, and this is one of the most difficult things, especially today. It's so important to know that sometimes, even with great personal sacrifice, you have to stay the course and do your job and do it in an honest, ethical, and effective manner. Service over self will be reflected as you stay here and watch your peer group be honored for the acts that they've accomplished. Service over self is your third pillar. The fourth pillar, or last pillar, is this. When your days are done being a police officer for the city of DeKalb, we have one expectation: that during your tenure here, you not only did the right thing, but you came in with the attitude of leaving us better than you found us. Every incremental step of the way, you're going to have something that you can contribute in a positive manner. Make that contribution. We're not perfect. We never will be. But if you strive to do the right thing and help your brothers and sisters out, we'll get there. We'll get there. At this time, I'd like to get one more round of applause and ask the families to return to their seats.
Hey, congratulations and welcome. Congratulations, welcome, Phil. Scott, thank you.
Congratulations.
Good to see you, Dad.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Lise.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Well done.
As we begin continue with our ceremony, one of the first categories we always recognize are those that are honorably recognized for certain acts. Police departments traditionally honor acts of bravery, honor life-saving, honoring clearing the big case or making a big arrest. And we're going to do some of that tonight. But we've made it a tradition here to honor acts of kindness as well. It's as important to embrace the community in a manner that they know how sincere you are by displaying your acts of kindness. And I have to say, it hasn't been hard with this group. So the first person we're going to recognize tonight for an act of kindness under honorable recognitions is Detective Chris Mecca. I have to tell everyone, Chris didn't want this to happen. He wanted to kind of keep this to himself, but I can't really say the words I said about what he couldn't do or could do tonight in regard to this, but I said he was going to go through with this anyway. Let me tell you the story. On January 23rd, 2018, a former DeKalb resident reported that her disabled sister was in a local hair salon getting her hair washed prior to her meeting her physician for a post-surgical follow-up. This woman described her sister as disabled, unable to wash her own hair, and she had limited financial means, being unable to pay for a complete wash and hair styling. Off-duty, Detective Chris Mecca was in the salon for a haircut. I wish I had the ability to go to a salon for a haircut. At the same time, he was there at the same time as this woman, and he overheard some of the conversation involving the lady and her stylist. He spoke up, indicating that she would feel a whole lot better if she could have her hair all taken care of before she went on to see her doctor. He then advised he would pay for her day at the salon, which he did, out of his own pocket. His act of kindness demonstrated immeasurable character and concern for a less fortunate person. He represented himself and the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you. As Chris is moving down, we're going to go ahead and move on.
Nice job.
The next individual coming up is Police Officer Brian Ballo. Police Officer Brian Ballo is going to be up here for a couple of minutes. He's got a couple things to go through here with us tonight. But the first thing we're going to do is under honorable recognitions again. We're going to look at something that he and a fellow officer, Police Officer Rita Reese, who's unable to attend tonight, did in regard to going the extra mile concerning a reckless driving complaint. On December 20th of 2017, officers responded to a citizen complaint concerning a reckless driver entering the city. The vehicle was located and stopped by Officer Brian Ballo. He discovered that the elderly driver was disoriented and trying to find her way home. Officer Rita Reese also responded to assist. They contacted the driver's daughter, and both officers ensured the driver got home. There was also a follow-up visit conducted, which found the female victim to still be disoriented, and she was ultimately transported to the hospital. It was determined that the victim was suffering from a heart attack, and had officers not taken the time to locate her and follow up on her condition, the outcome may have been very tragic. They're here tonight, or Officer Ballo is here tonight, to be recognized for dedication to duty and for the concern for this elderly victim. They represented themselves and the police department in an exemplary manner. Stay put. Let's try for another act of kindness in regard to Officer Brian Ballo. On July 16th, 2018, Officer Ballo responded to the 1300 block of North 1st Street for a child that had fallen off her bike and she had been injured. Upon arriving on scene, Officer Ballo observed a 10-year-old female who was crouched over her bike crying. What he found was that the little girl had a handbrake impaled in her right leg. He held the victim in a manner to relieve pressure on the injury until the fire department could arrive and use a hydraulic tool to cut through the handlebar of the bike. She was stabilized and transported to the hospital where the handbrake was removed from her leg. The next day, Officer Ballo went to the victim's home to complete his investigation and to meet with the victim. He also came bearing gifts, again, gifts from his own pocket, for the young lady who had been hurt. His follow-up act of kindness spoke volumes regarding his character and concern for the victim. He represented himself and the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you. Brian's up here for the trifecta, so we're going to move on to commendations. This first commendation is for an incident of unlawful use of credit cards and identity theft. What's kind of unique about this is Officer Ballo works the street day in and day out. For those of you who have ever been taken advantage of in regard to a credit card, or especially identity theft, it's one of the most difficult crimes to investigate, because oftentimes the offenders are in a land from a foreign country, outside of the city, somewhere else other than here. So it makes it exceptionally difficult to follow up on. Let me tell you the story. This investigation began in April of 2016 and culminated in the arrest of 3 offenders in 2018. At the onset, Officer Brian Ballo learned that a female suspect had paid her rent with a fraudulent credit card. This officer took the initiative to traffic stop the suspect, who at the time of the stop provided a false name. She was ultimately arrested for obstructing, and during the search of her vehicle, several items of evidentiary value were recovered. Those items linked the suspect to numerous incidents of credit card fraud. Officer Ballo conducted a thorough investigation that identified 56 victims. Those victims had their identity stolen, and their credit cards were used in multiple jurisdictions. In total, 3 offenders were identified, and over 60 felony charges were filed against the original female offender, and 2 males were also arrested on felony counts of unlawful use of credit cards. Officer Ballo demonstrated his investigative skills and determination to bring these offenders to justice. And imagine resolving cases for 56 victims. That's quite an accomplishment. He is to be commended for a job well done and has represented himself and the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you for all of your work.
Good, Rena. The next group of officers to be honored are Police Officers Aaron Kleinmeyer, Charles Verdoni, Danielle Sorensen, Abedin O'Lanaran, Sergeant Scott Farrell. Officer Sorensen and Sergeant Farrell will not be in attendance tonight. Looks like we have maybe a couple others missing as well. Just kidding. On October 8th, 2017, officers responded to a shots fired incident in Walsh Park. And this incident is categorized as an aggravated discharge of a firearm. Upon arriving on scene, officers secured the area and conducted a coordinated search. Several victims and witnesses were located, interviewed, and an accurate description of the suspects and their vehicle was obtained. A cellular phone was also recovered at the scene, which assisted in the identification of a person who matched the description of the armed offender. Physical evidence at the scene indicated that a minimum of 9 rounds had been discharged from a firearm, which included apartment buildings being struck in a nearby University Village from the discharge of that ammunition. The actions by the officers arriving on scene prior to that of the arrival of detectives would not only put a solid foundation under the investigation, but help to further it and ultimately lead to the apprehension of the offender. That offender was charged with aggravated discharge of a firearm. All involved demonstrated their investigative skills, their dedication to duty. They are to be commended for a job well done and have represented themselves in the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next category of commendation is in regard to an unlawful possession and delivery of controlled substances. During a joint investigation with the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, it was learned that narcotics were being sold from a residence in the 600 block of North 10th Street. Officers assigned to the Targeted Response Unit and from the Sheriff's Office began the investigation that confirmed that street gang members were selling the narcotics. Their investigation would ultimately lead to a search warrant being executed on October 3rd, 2017. Recovered during the search warrant were 2 handguns along with quantities of cannabis, cocaine, and prescription narcotics. The firearms were believed to be linked to other gang-related shootings, and 2 offenders were ultimately arrested for unlawful possession and delivery of controlled substances and unlawful possession of firearms. All involved in this investigation demonstrated great teamwork, interagency cooperation, and dedication to duty. The officers involved in this incident were police officers Chris Mecca, Jason Goodwin, Stephen Parsons, DeKalb County Sheriff's Office Detective Alex Becker, and Sergeant Paul Mott. They're all to be commended for a job well done in representing themselves and their agencies in an exemplary manner. Further, by their actions, they probably prevented additional gang violence. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. Thank you. Thank you.
We had to wait for a little recovery here. This next incident is an incident involving armed violence, unlawful possession of controlled substance, armed habitual criminal, unlawful possession of a weapon by a felon, and aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. Police officers Chris Mecca, Jason Goodwin, and Detective Sonny Street. Officer Goodwin is not present tonight. On April 29, 2017, during a traffic stop conducted by members of the Targeted Response Unit and Detective Division, officers encountered 5 occupants in a vehicle believed to be trafficking narcotics. A K-9 team was called and arrived to assist and alerted for the presence of drugs. The vehicle was searched, cannabis and a loaded handgun that was reported stolen in a local burglary was recovered. 2 offenders were charged with cannabis and alcohol violations, a third was arrested on an unrelated warrant, and a 4th offender was charged with armed violence, unlawful possession of a firearm by a felon, and other offenses. The 5th offender was eventually charged after an investigation with cannabis and alcohol offenses, those originally at the scene. However, the subsequent investigation revealed or resulted in his arrest for armed habitual criminal, unlawful possession of a weapon by a felon, aggravated unlawful use of a weapon, and other weapons offenses. Their investigation culminated with the arrest of the 5th offender in December 2017 in the city of Chicago. All involved in this incident displayed proactive enforcement measures, are to be commended for a job well done, and for removing 2 armed violent offenders from our streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks again.
As they're walking through, not this last commendation, but before, you saw a detective from the Sheriff's Office here. You're going to see some police officers from NIU involved in this next case. I think this is an appropriate moment to say that interagency cooperation in the city of DeKalb, throughout DeKalb County, is at a very, very high level. And had it not been for that level of cooperation, many of these cases wouldn't be here today. The next case is an aggravated unlawful use of weapons. Police officers Jared Burke, John Leckel, Michael Cicchetti, Abedin O'Lanaran, Detectives Erkey and Street, Sergeant Michael Stewart, NIU Police Officer Eric Howland, and Officer Matthew Lave, and DeKalb volunteer Bob Myers. Officer Burke is not in attendance tonight. On March 27, 2018, officers responded to an apartment in the 1000 block of West Hillcrest Drive for a subject armed with a handgun threatening the caller's brother. Officers arrived on scene, coordinated their approach, ascended the stairs toward the apartment, and while ascending the stairs, they heard the action of a gun being charged. At the top of the stairs, they observed an offender armed with a handgun. That offender immediately fled into an apartment. The scene was secured, contact was made with the occupants, and 2 persons exited the apartment. When they exited, both subjects denied that anyone else was inside. After continuing their efforts, eventually 2 more subjects exited. They too said no one else was inside the apartment. Officers in the meantime had also begun the evacuation of nearby apartments for the safety of the residents. Subsequently, a search warrant was obtained, a drone deployed, and the special operation teams executed the warrant. The offender had barricaded himself in a bedroom. He was taken into custody and charged with aggravated unlawful use of a weapon, a handgun, and other offenses. A loaded 9mm handgun was recovered at the scene. All personnel involved demonstrated their ability to work together, using their skills to resolve this incident without injury, and are to be commended for a job well done, having represented themselves in their agencies and our community with our volunteer Bob Meyer, who flew our drone for us. They did so representing themselves and our agency and our community in an exemplary manner, and I thank you all.
Thanks again. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, thanks, Bob. Hey, how you doing? Thanks, Steve.
You know, as they're passing through, it's nice to have community members step up like that and to be a partner with the police, which has been a goal of ours for a long time.
Thank you very much.
This next incident commendation is in regard to a burglary at Twins Tavern. Those to be recognized are police officers Trevor Burdick, Joseph Gordon, Michael Cicchetti, Ryan Wilkins, Detectives Chris Mecca and Sonny Street, and Sergeant Michael Stewart. On June 3rd, 2018, officers responded to an alarm at Twins Tavern in the 1000 block of South 4th Street, where this victim business had been burglarized several times before. Upon arriving on scene, officers established a perimeter. When they got there, they located pry marks where the offender had gained entry, enforced entry, and positioned themselves to be able to observe the offender while he remained inside, going about his business trying to secure proceeds from the crime. After approximately 20 minutes, the offender exited the business, I must say unbeknownst to him, while wearing a hooded sweatshirt. His face was covered. He exited holding a duffel bag and a pry bar, with and in the bag was a fairly large amount of cash. As he exited, these officers took him into custody without incident. He would later admit to detectives his responsibility for the other burglaries at that location and was ultimately charged with 4 counts of commercial burglary. The personnel involved demonstrated their skills in responding to and investigating these crimes. They are to be commended for a job well done. They have represented themselves in the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done.
A little backstory to this case while we're trying to regroup here for the next commendation. As the council knows, we often get grants through the Department of Justice for small amounts, but throughout the course of the years, that money's been used to buy technology. That business, we had deployed technology to help us apprehend those offenders. So that was technology we had received funding for through the Department of Justice. We implemented that technology because of that business being victimized more than once, and that ultimately helped us, which ultimately helped the officers respond and apprehend the offender. The next case we're going to talk about is a drug and weapons offense. On June 28th, 2018, officers from the Targeted Response Unit were making an arrest in a rental property in the 800 block of West Hillcrest Drive on an unrelated investigation when they detected a strong odor of cannabis emitting from another apartment. The officers contacted the occupants of the suspect apartment who appeared nervous when questioned about the odor. The occupants denied officers consent to search the apartment, which ultimately led them to obtaining a search warrant. The search warrant was executed, in which 4 pounds of cannabis was recovered, along with $2,300 and a loaded 9mm handgun. The officers involved demonstrated their investigative skills and proactive policing strategies regarding the seizure and the ongoing investigation. They are commended for a job well done and have represented themselves in the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next case we're going to talk about is a series of burglaries to motor vehicles. What really sits in the back of my mind in regard to this case for the council and for the community is in 2016 we saw a huge spike in crime. That spike in crime, a large component of that or portion of that increase was due to juvenile offenders who were breaking into cars. So that lays out some of the importance for this next commendation. On July 15, 2018, during the late evening hours, officers responded to the 800 block of North 12th Street. The officers that were primary on this case were police officers Jonathan Bell and Trevor Burdick. When they arrived, they met with a citizen and were advised that two suspicious subjects were looking into cars in the neighborhood. They took that information and went out looking for them. And they also, before they departed that immediate area, and as they were looking for these subjects, noticed there were several cars with dome lights on in the neighborhood. A short distance away, the officers located 3 male juveniles, 2 of which matched the descriptions of the individuals involved. Those juveniles were taken into custody. All 3 were interviewed, and it was determined that 2 of the juveniles were burglarizing several vehicles in the area. Both were charged with burglary to vehicles. The officers responded to this call in a professional manner. They knew the importance of this. They knew what this could do in a neighborhood. They conducted a systematic search of the area, and they ultimately located those offenders. They're commended for their dedication to duty, a job well done, and with their apprehension of these juvenile offenders, Lord only knows how many people would have been victimized that night. And they put an end to that little crime spree that those juveniles decided to undertake. They have represented themselves in the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Trevor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done.
The next case we're going to be talking about is a reckless discharge of a firearm. Officers Aaron Gates, Lance Reinboltz, Elizabeth Fabro, Detective Sonny Street, and Sergeant Tony Kwasniewski. Tonight, Officer Fabro will not be attending. On July 20th, 2018, officers responded to a shots fired call in the 900 block of West Hillcrest Drive. I got to introduce TAC too. He was actually there as well. Can't sell our four-legged officer short. Officers responded to a shots fired call in the 900 block of West Hillcrest Drive. Upon arriving on scene, officers recovered 11 spent shell casings. Now, as we finish up this commendation, I want you to put that in your brains. 11 rounds are discharged in a highly populated rental property residential community. The outcome of that could have been devastating had someone been hit. They located witnesses and identified the apartment building where the offender may be located. While checking the building for potential victims, officers overheard a conversation in which a female was discussing a shooting her husband was involved in. Using the information from that conversation, officers secured the scene, cleared the residence, and acquired a search warrant for the apartment. Officers recovered a handgun and several hundred rounds of ammunition during their subsequent search. The investigation revealed that the suspect was upset that a large crowd had gathered in front of his residence and discharged his weapon to disperse the crowd. The suspect later surrendered himself and was charged with reckless discharge of a firearm and unlawful use of a weapon by a felon. These officers did a great job. They demonstrated their proactive and investigative skills. They are to be commended for a job well done and for taking an armed offender off of our streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you. I hope someone gets an extra treat tonight. Okay, thank you.
I always get concerned about shaking the canine's hand, you know? They're pretty protective of their handler, so I treat that with respect. The next commendation involves a traffic stop that turned unlawful use of weapons arrest. The officers involved are Officers Aaron Kleinmeyer and Charles Verdoni. On August 4th, 2018, Officer Aaron Kleinmeyer was on patrol when he observed a vehicle fail to stop at a stop sign at the intersection of Greenbrier and Russell Roads. He initiated a traffic stop and met with the driver, during which time he could smell an odor of cannabis coming from inside the vehicle. Officer Charles Verdoni arrived to assist. When the occupants were asked to exit the vehicle, they complied, and the driver advised that there may be remnants of cannabis inside the vehicle. There really wasn't all that much found cannabis-wise, but during the subsequent search, officers recovered a loaded 9mm handgun in the glove compartment of the car. The driver was subsequently arrested for unlawful use of weapons. These two officers demonstrated their proactive policing and investigative skills. They are commended for a job well done or for taking an armed offender off our streets.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The next commendation we're going to talk about is a traffic stop turned controlled substance arrest. Officers Jason Goodwin, Stephen Parsons, and Aaron Gates with his canine partner TAC. Officer Goodwin's not present tonight. On August 10th, 2018, officers observed a vehicle make an improper turn and subsequently stop the unit in the 1200 block of Rushmore Drive. Officers recognized the occupants in the vehicle from previous police contacts they had. They requested the assistance of a canine team, which arrived and did assist in conducting an open-air sniff of the vehicle for suspected narcotics. The canine team, having done its job, an alert for the presence of narcotics. This ultimately would lead to the occupants indicating that someone had previously smoked cannabis inside the vehicle. However, there were no other narcotics inside. A subsequent search of the vehicle located a hidden compartment behind the headlight switch, which contained 29 grams of crack cocaine, packaged for sale, which included a measuring scale. Also secured during the investigation was over $3,000 in cash. What's really important to know about this case is so many times police officers stop vehicles, they don't know what they're going to encounter once they get into the car or encounter the individuals in the car. But these officers went the extra mile. They looked a little harder. They did the right thing, and in a hidden compartment found that crack cocaine. The driver was arrested for unlawful possession of controlled substance with the intent to deliver and other offenses. The officers demonstrated their investigative skills and dedication to duty, turning a traffic stop into an arrest of a crack cocaine dealer. They are commended for a job well done and have represented themselves in the police department in an exemplary manner. Thank you.
Thank you. And he needs a long run now. Thank you.
We're about to begin the last category of actual awards to be presented tonight, and these are life-saving awards. And if there are loved ones present in regard to the potential pinning of these, do you have family here tonight, gentlemen? Okay. Why don't we have the family come up? I guess all I had to do was look in the audience. The family's pretty visible there. Let me tell you a little bit about this case. This is a case involving an assist to the fire department in aggravated battery. The officers to be acknowledged, police officers Jeffrey Ackland, retired police officer Bert Johnson, Officer Mario Noneman, Officer Jason Watson, Officer Jeff Winters, who also recently retired, and Sergeant Jeffrey Weiss. Officers Noneman and retired Officer Johnson and Winters and Ackland are not going to be attending tonight. On January 10th, 2018, officers responded to a residence in the 1400 block of Mulliff Street regarding an infant not breathing. Upon arriving on scene, officers initiated rescue breathing on the infant. They stabilized the victim's head and began chest compressions, and an AED was attached. When the ambulance arrived, officers transferred the baby to the ambulance to be transported to the hospital. The infant was ultimately revived at the hospital. It was later determined that one of the infant's parents had shaken the baby, causing the injuries. The actions of these officers saved the infant's life, and their on-scene investigation was crucial in the prosecution of the parent. The officers demonstrated their life-saving investigative skills. They represented themselves and the police department in an exemplary manner. Maybe the most important thing, not maybe, but the most important thing is they gave that child a second chance on life. So in order to acknowledge them and thank them, I'd like their family members to go ahead and present them with their awards.
The first test is whether you can.
Everyone in the audience wants to know if you drew blood. How about a round of applause? As we prepare to get the next individual out there, I just want to say that I have to give always a shout out to the fire department.
Really fine.
They're doing this every day, day in and day out, saving lives. And police officers have limited training in comparison to the firefighters and paramedics. But they work so well together, hand in hand, that it makes a really dynamic intervention on the street. And I believe we actually save far more people than we may, depending on how some of these circumstances are played out. But it's a great teamwork, and thank you, Chief Hicks, for that. The next officer is Police Officer Lance Reinbolts. This is in regard to a male subject unconscious and bleeding on the sidewalk. On May 28, 2018, Officer Lance Reinbolts responded to the 1000 block of West Lincoln Highway regarding a male subject that was unconscious, bleeding, and lying on the sidewalk in front of an apartment building. Upon arriving on scene, Officer Reinbolts located the suspect, determined he was unresponsive, and based on his training and assessment of the victim, he administered 2 doses of our narcotic antidote. The ambulance would subsequently arrive on scene. The victim was subsequently transported to the hospital, where he recovered and indicated that he had been consuming alcohol and prescription narcotics most of the day. Had it not been for the officer's quick assessment and effective response, the victim probably would not have survived. Officer Reinboltz demonstrated his life-saving skills. He represented himself and the police department in an exemplary manner in giving the victim a second chance on life. He is hereby presented with the life-saving award. And Lance, do you have somebody here for you? I'm going to let the deputy chief take care of that.
You better know how to do that, Lance.
Thank you.
The next couple is continuing this trend, and the trend is unfortunately about opioid overdoses. This will be another unresponsive male suspected of a narcotics overdose. The police officers to be honored are Police Officers Charles Verdoni, Stephen Parsons, Raul Barraza, and Sergeant Michael Stewart. On July 21st, 2018, officers responded to an apartment in the 1200 block of Rushmore Drive for an unresponsive male believed to be suffering from a narcotics overdose. Upon arriving on scene, the officers worked as a team when they found the unresponsive male in obvious medical distress. From the initial assessment of the victim to initiating sternum rubs and the deployment of 2 doses of a narcotic antidote, the victim remained unresponsive. While preparing to apply an AED, a 3rd dose of the narcotic antidote was administered. The subject became responsive and was ultimately transported by the fire department by ambulance to the hospital. The officers used their training, their medical resources, worked as a team, and displayed their life-saving skills. They represented themselves and the police department in an exemplary manner and again gave a victim a second chance on life. They are now presented with the life-saving award. Do you have some family here to do this? Step forward, please. Outstanding. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
As we prepare to bring the last group in for life-saving awards, I just want to say that a little bit of training goes a long way. The entire department's been trained on the deployment of Narcan, a narcotic antidote. They've also been trained in CPR, largely facilitated by the fire department. As a result of this, many cases come out in a much better way than they may have otherwise. For the last call tonight, or the last incident to be discussed for life-saving awards, this is in regard to a female subject found unresponsive and in obvious medical distress. Police officers Aaron Kleinmeyer, Kevin Farragon, and NIU PD officer Brian Gherkin. On July 22, 2018, officers responded to the 1300 block of West Lincoln Highway regarding a 911 investigation. Upon arriving on scene, officers found an unresponsive 16-year-old female on the ground believed to be suffering from a narcotics overdose. Officers administered a narcotic antidote and initiated rescue breathing until the ambulance arrived on scene. A search of the victim's purse located a controlled substance, and a witness reported that she had been consuming alcohol and marijuana during the day. While en route to the hospital, the victim regained consciousness. Had it not been for their actions, the actions of the responding officers, the victim could have sustained further injury or death. Officers displayed their life-saving skills. They represented themselves and their agencies in an exemplary manner, giving the victim a second chance on life. Again, giving a victim a second chance on life. They are hereby presented with life-saving awards. And if there are any family members present, I'd ask you to step forward. I guess we got the chief coming up here. That's a different kind of family member. That's okay. Just teasing. Thank you, Chief, for coming through in the pinch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there were a few other incidents. We have no other officers to be formally commended, but I have a few incidents just to describe as we close out this ceremony. And boy, this might be the first time I've been on time at a city council meeting in a long time. These next are major commendable incidents that so many people were involved in, from support personnel to telecommunicators to officers on the street to other agencies. It would almost be impossible to recognize everyone. But during the fall of 2017, the city was paralyzed by numerous shootings, many of which were linked to street gangs. The DeKalb Police and its partners in the Major Case Squad ended up resolving those cases by securing evidence and identifying the offenders, culminating with the arrest of 14 individuals involved. This was an exceptional response by all involved, by comparison to other communities in our region that have experienced the same type of shootings. Few of those shootings in those communities are resolved. As a matter of fact, I can say that having spoken to the Rockford Police Chief, who's a dear friend of mine, and others from Rockford recently, including the local supervisory special agent for the FBI Rockford office, our department and the Major Case Squad have a little bit of a reputation that if you're going to come here to do bad things, you're probably going to get arrested, especially in situations like this. So I have to commend all of them for all their work. The next incident occurred on February 22nd, 2018. DeKalb Police responded to a possible domestic disturbance that would evolve into a barricaded gunman incident near First Street and Fisk Avenue. The situation required a massive response that included on-duty personnel, NIU police, DeKalb County Sheriff's deputies, and the Special Operations Team, which include a variety of other folks. The incident ended in the execution of a high-risk search warrant. The offender was taken into custody without injury, and there were several firearms and narcotics recovered. The noteworthy thing about this case is not only that it was certainly a high-risk incident, it was about all the agencies in this county that continue to demonstrate day in and day out that they work together in concert with one another to get the job done. Oftentimes without the resources standing alone, but with the resources standing together. In this situation, it was resolved without incident. Again, in a highly populated neighborhood, it could have gone much worse. Thanks to those who were there on our behalf. On July 15th, 2018, the DeKalb Police responded to a shots fired incident in the 900 block of Greenbrier Road. Some of this was acknowledged a little earlier, but here numerous rounds were discharged from a vehicle at the front porch of an apartment complex on Greenbrier Road. That front porch was occupied by numerous individuals. Not only did this person fire a gun from a passing vehicle at the porch numerous times, one of the subjects on the porch returned gunfire. In the middle of a rental property residential area, multiple rounds were exchanged. Only by the grace of God was no one hit. This investigation required a significant response. The DeKalb Police and the Detective Division especially led that charge and ultimately identified 2 offenders from Aurora. Both were charged with aggravated discharge of a firearm. This required a significant amount of time and effort, but it resulted in their arrests. The work done by all displayed sound investigative skills and a professional response to a tragic situation that could have been much worse. The last case I'll acknowledge on a grander scale is with another tremendous response was on August 7th, 2018. DeKalb Police, NIU Police, and the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office responded to a shots fired incident in the 900 block of Pappas Drive where multiple rounds were discharged. Witnesses provided key information to the police which ultimately led to the identification of a 16-year-old juvenile offender from Aurora. The case required a significant police response. There was exceptional coordination between the law enforcement agencies involved, and the offender was quickly identified, arrested, and 2 handguns were recovered. I can tell you from being out there that day, it was not a pleasant day to be out there because it started pouring rain. But they stood the line, they did their jobs, and they did it working together. For this case and the others that I mentioned here in closing and throughout this whole night, I want to say thank you to the men and women of law enforcement. Thank you to the council for allowing us to do this. And in closing, would say this: our police officers are warriors when they have to be. They are always peacekeepers. They are always guardians. They are always servants of the people. At times they are lifesavers, at times they are heroes. But for the council and the community, I want you to know that they're also good people. Thank you very much.
What a marvelous ceremony this evening. Thank you, Gene. And thank you to our DeKalb Police Department. Let's give them a big round of applause. With that, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn this meeting of the Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. City Council will convene at 6:15. 6:15. Thank you very much.